Hi, so welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to be talking about the eyeshadow palettes that I have in my collection and some of the products that I plan to declutter. Today's a rainy day here, so the lighting might keep changing quite a bit. I hope I can still, get a clear video, but yeah, that's the conditions I'm working with right now. And there are a couple of palettes that I've already kind of decided to throw away because they are probably expired. So I can maybe quickly go through those. And then I do have a couple of palettes which are staying in my collection. And there are some which are like a maybe. So yeah, I do have quite a few palettes. I probably won't be swatching anything because I have quite a few palettes to go through. So I'll quickly like open the palettes and talk about them a little bit. But yeah, otherwise I'm just basically not going to be swatching anything. The other thing is, yeah, a majority of the palettes that I'm going to be removing from my collection are probably going to be thrown to the bin because I have used them quite a bit and I don't think I want to give them to anybody. So yeah, so that's it, except for maybe a couple. I do see one or two palettes which actually might be in good condition to give someone. But yeah, for the majority of them, I probably will be just basically binning them. So that's it. So first, let's get started with some of the palettes that I'm actually using right now this month. I pulled out the Too Faced Gingerbread Extra Spicy palette to kind of use this month. This was actually released in 2019 holiday, I believe. Yeah, just before the pandemic. So this is the extra spicy one. I think the first gingerbread palette that they released was called just Gingerbread Spicy, I think. I don't know. That was released in 2018. So this was the second one in the gingerbread series. And this is what the palette looks like. I really like the Too Faced formula in these kind of tin packaging. And this one is no exception. I really like the formulation of the mattes and the shimmers here. The only problem I have is that I just realized that my style and my preferences for eyeshadows have changed quite a bit over the last couple of years. I don't like these kind of warm tones anymore. They're just too warm for me. But at the same time, I've been having fun using them because I haven't used warm tone shadows in a really long time. So it was fun that way, but this is probably not going to be a palette I will gravitate towards on a regular basis. But because I like the formula and I like the packaging as well, and the shadows still perform really nicely, I will just keep it in my collection and maybe use it a couple of more times before I say goodbye to that one. Similarly, I do have another Too Faced palette, which is in the tin, and that is the Too Faced Stickle Peach palette. This particular palette is, I think it's pretty old. It's at least 3 years old, but I did recently see this on Too Faced's website, so I'm not sure if it has come back for a brief moment or what. In fact, I even saw this in the sale page yesterday on Too Faced's website. This is one of my favorite Too Faced palettes simply because of how well thought out the whole color story is. It's such a nice, compact, unique color scheme. I really like the shimmers here, and the mattes are absolutely beautiful. This is one of my favorite matte shades here. As you can see, quite a bit of usage there. And yeah, so this is also something that's not going anywhere. I'm going to use it a little bit more before it's, expired. It's probably expired. I don't know. As per this, it's like 12 months. But yeah, it's still going strong. It doesn't seem to be performing badly or anything. The other palette that I've been using recently is from One Size, and this is part of their holiday kit that they released this year. So this is pretty new, and this is what it looks like on the inside. It's a very warm tone palette. I mean, out of the two options that they had in the holiday kits, this was a slightly more neutral and less warm, but on my eyes, I still find this to be pretty warm. But the formula is really nice and I really like using this. And this is like a very easy to throw on, like, if you're in a rush, you can just quickly pull out this quad. There's like the colors are all chosen for you and sort of thing. So it's actually pretty nice that way. So this one is staying in my collection. It's pretty new. Another palette which is brand new, which I haven't really even used yet and I plan to use next month, is from Catrice. I recently picked this up from Catrice's website. I've heard a lot of people talking about these Bay palettes that they released. I think it must be at least a year ago, where the formula was really nice. So I was very curious about it and I just decided to just buy it from Catrice's website. The the protective film is still on because I haven't touched this palette yet. I hope to use this next month. This one is like a very basic palette, as the name says. It's pretty nice. The color story looks a little bit more boring than I thought it would be when I first picked it up online, but I'm looking forward to using it because I've heard such good things about the formula. And generally, these are the kind of shades that I gravitate towards on a regular basis anyway. So I'm guessing if I like the formula, I'll probably land up using this quite a bit on a regular basis. So this was the Catrice Basic Bay palette. Again, I haven't used it, so it's staying in my collection. Now, the next couple of palettes that I'm going to show you are actually quite old, and therefore I'm just going to be chucking them, and I'm not really going to, I think they're pretty old. They're at least 5 years old. Like, for example, this Zoeva palette. This is the Zoeva Coco Blend palette. This was one of my favorite palettes. I really enjoyed the color story of this palette. This is what it looks like on the inside. It was just like, it was perfect for me. I really like these kind of shades. I really like, again, this brown was like my favorite for the crease. Overall, I really liked this when I first got it. I think, like I said, probably 5 years ago. So at this point, it's probably expired. So I'm going to be, throwing this away. It makes me kind of sad because I think Zoeva doesn't make these palettes anymore. They've kind of redone their entire line. They're like doing different style of packaging, and the brand as such, I feel like they've kind of tried to overhaul it a bit, and Zoeva is not so easily available anymore. So yeah, I'm kind of sad to say bye to it. It's a beautiful palette, and the formula of this palette, actually, interestingly, at the point when I picked it up like 5 years ago, the formula was pretty good. But now if you compare it with a lot of the other palettes out in the market, the formula is not that great. So even if I had the option to repurchase this in the same formula, I probably won't, unless, they come out with the same color story and they sort of improve the formula a little bit. I do remember that the mattes were good, but the shimmers were not that great in this palette compared to the newer shimmers you see in palettes these days. So this was one. Oh, this is another palette which is pretty old. This is from Pure. I'm actually not even going to take it out of the packaging because I think it has a little bit of mold in it. So because I just opened it before this video and I saw that there's a little bit of mold, so I'm not going to open it. This is the Pure Midnight Masquerade palette. It's actually a face palette with these face products and these eyeshadows, and I had picked this up from TJ Maxx. This one is, I remember that I didn't really like the face products too much. They were too dark for my skin tone, and the formula was just okay. And the eyeshadows were pretty nice. I mean, they were interesting shades, but again, nothing too crazy. And I haven't really been attracted to the brand Pure as such. Yeah, it's just okay, not my thing. Now, the next eyeshadow palette is also really old, but this I'll probably keep in like my, I have like a keepsake bag where I put a lot of makeup products which I've no longer used, but they have very pretty packaging, and therefore, I just like to hang on to them. This is one of those palettes. This is from Anna Sui. This again is easily 7 years old probably, and to be quite honest, it almost looks like you can still use it simply because it smells fine. It still has that strong rose scent that this palette very much had when I first got it. And yeah, I think I recently even swatched this and it was still performing fine. But I don't know, 7 years was pushing it, especially for an eye product. So I'm not going to use it. I'm going to keep this in my keepsake pile because I really like the packaging. Anna Sui packaging is generally very nice and pretty, and this is no exception. I think this palette is, okay, it's made in the US. I thought it was made in Japan. Anyway, this was actually, it was, the formula wise, if I remember correctly, it was nothing special. I just generally liked the color story, and yeah, that's one of the reasons why I picked it up. I remember that it was quite not very pigmented. It was a very, they used to give sheer wash of color, most of these eyeshadows, and yeah, they were not like super intense. You could get very nice light looks. So if you want like just a nice hint of light pink or peach on your eyes, this was what I used to like to do. Ugh. Yeah, this was a nice light pink there if you want to just like have a nice bit of light pink on your eyelids. And this was also like something nice. Peach was good. Anyway, this palette had its day. So that's going to my keepsake pile. The other palette that I've already decided to throw away is my Lorac Pro, I think this is Pro 2, the one which is more cool toned. And this is what my palette looks like. The shade Rosé was one of my favorites, and I used to also like the shade Chrome. I remember these two were like my most used shimmer shades in this palette. And again, the light brown was my favorite for the crease. This palette was very nice. It was one of the first cool tone palettes, completely cool tone palettes that I owned. And I used to really like this one. The formula was very nice. Everything about this palette was quite nice, and I had a good time using it, but now it's time to go simply because it's pretty old. As you can see, even from the packaging, it's beginning to look a little bit tatty. So this is the Lorac Pro palette, which is really old. Now, the next palette, which is also very old and I'm going to be throwing, is this old Smashbox holiday palette from, I think, 2014, 2015. This one, I kept it for a long time for sentimental reasons, and now I decided, you know, it's just a bit too bulky. If you can see, it's like really thick. It's like a very sturdy palette, but it's extremely thick and very hard to store. So I think it's just time to throw it away. It was a very nice palette. I really like the formula of this palette. As you can see, this is the colors. It had like every color that you can try out and have fun with. It was a real fun palette to have, and I really enjoyed my time with this palette. You know, you have this entire section which was all neutrals, which was fun for daily use, and then we had the purples and a little bit of blue and a little more of the cooler tones on this side. So overall, this was an amazing palette. But again, it's time to go. It's really old. So, and yeah, like I said, I kept this with me for a very long time for sentimental reasons, but now I guess it's just time to go. It's just too bulky, and yeah, I think I'm kind of over it. So those were palettes that are going to be trashed. Now I have a bunch of palettes which are like on the maybe pile and sort of like in the chopping block. So first off is this palette from Kiko Milano. This was, I think, part of their Sicilian Notes collection, which was at least 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was released 3 years ago. I'm not very sure. I don't know. So this is what the palette looks like. The layout of this palette is very beautiful. As you can see, I was very much attracted to the layout. I found that it's just very unique. There's nothing like this in the market, which is basically why I picked it up. The problem with this palette is that, as you can see, it's basically got a lot of that, what do you call it? Hard pan on it, on the matte shades and the shimmer shades, everything. And this shimmer is extremely flaky. This gold is just atrocious when it comes to the flakiness. In this palette, the only two shimmer shades I liked were this one and this one. And I have those shades in multiple palettes. So I'm kind of thinking maybe it's time to say goodbye to this one as well. And I'm also beginning to question whether I should keep this just for the, you know, beauty of it, like, you know, the layout and stuff. So yeah, so it's probably not going to go into the trash can. I might just keep it to keep like as a keepsake. And also this also has some level of sentimental value. This was the palette I picked up when my brother came from Singapore, and we were like roaming around in New York City together, having so much fun. And yeah, I picked this up from Kiko Milano's store in New York, so it kind of is special for me that way. So I might just hang on to it for that particular memory. But other than that, I don't think I'm going to be using that palette anytime again. Now, this is an old Avon holiday palette. I don't usually buy from Avon or any of those MLMs, but I remember this particular holiday collection, they came out with such beautiful lipsticks, and I just decided to add this one particular face and eye palette, I think. Yeah, it's the Iconic Beauty palette. It has 4 eyeshadows and 2 blushes. I just added it to my cart just to kind of get free shipping. And yeah, these were like really terrible eyeshadows. The formula is just, I don't know what to say. It just basically has no pigment. At the max, I think I remember the gold is usable. The rest of these are just terrible. The face products were okay, but again, nothing extraordinary or special. So this is probably not expired actually. I don't know. But again, I might just throw this away. most likely might just, okay, maybe I will donate it. Let me see if there's anybody who wants to use this palette. But yeah, the formula is so bad, I don't want to even donate it. So maybe it's just going to go to the bin. Yeah, that's going in the bin. Now, the next palette is this one. This is the Laura Geller, the Delectables eyeshadow palette. This one is also a bit old, and I had picked this up from, I think, TJ Maxx. And I think this one has also gone bad, most likely. Yeah, this is what the palette looks like. And yeah, it's actually got very beautiful shades. And as with most baked eyeshadows, you have to probably wet your brush if you want like major intense looks. But this particular one, I remember it was working fine even if you use them like dry. So I actually enjoyed this palette when I was using it at one point. So I have no issues with this baked formula from Laura Geller, at least for this particular palette. But yeah, but I think these shadows are pretty old now, and I might just throw them away because they do have like a bit, I don't know if it's the cardboard or if it's the shadows. It just has a funny smell. So I'm just going to play safe and just throw this away. But yeah, the shades are very nice. I like the shade selection in this palette. Yeah, overall it's just got very nice. And again, all the neutral shades here, I have them in other palettes. And so, you know, maybe the shades that are most interesting in this palette is Forest and Ocean. And the rest of them, I think I easily got them in other palettes. So it's okay. I think I'll probably just throw this palette away as well. So that's another one that's leaving my collection. And now what do we have? Oh yes, then we have this one. This was actually a very recent purchase. I did do a review on this, I think maybe last week or a week and a half ago. This is the Stila Camouflage eyeshadow palette, very new to my collection. I'm not throwing this. This is absolutely beautiful. If you find this palette at, you know, either Nordstrom Rack or at TJ Maxx, I highly recommend that you pick this one up. The formula of the metallics is amazing. The mattes are very blendable, very nice. Overall, it's a beautiful palette. And I had a lot of fun using all the shades in this palette. So again, this is something that's not leaving my collection. I really enjoy this palette. So this is staying. So that's another one that's staying. The next one is actually a Pat McGrath Mini. I'm actually not sure what I should be doing about this palette. This one, to be very honest, I'm one of the few people who don't enjoy Pat McGrath's formula. I know that a lot of people are going to bring out their pitchforks when I say that. In fact, I think the review of this palette, the video that I did have a lot of people getting defensive, saying you should use a primer, you are not using the right primer, etc., etc. The thing is, a lot of the palettes that I own, for example, this Too Faced one, it's way cheaper than Pat McGrath, and the formula is so good I don't need to use a primer. So why should I have to spend money on Pat McGrath and then, you know, bother about using a primer to make it work? It just doesn't make sense to me. So anyway, this particular palette doesn't have any of the special shades, which I think is the big draw in Pat McGrath's formula, her palettes. This one is like her standard eyeshadow formula, and I'm not very impressed. The reason being that they're very flaky, they also crease, and I do have dry eyelids, which is one of the reasons why I don't use a primer. So I don't know. And I did, at the time when I picked this up, I was using eyeshadow primer regularly. Nowadays, I just don't. And even that time with the primer, I found that these shadows crease. So I was not very impressed even using a primer. So overall, I don't know what to do about this palette. I did spend quite a bit of money on it. Not as much as one of her motherships, but still it was money spent. So I'm still kind of thinking if I should try to give this, you know, one more go and then see if there's anything different. I don't think anything different is going to happen, but still I might just keep it for the time being, I guess. I don't know. Maybe at the end of this year, if I don't use it, if I don't reach for it, I will probably declutter it. So this is more like a maybe. So yeah, I have my first maybe eyeshadow palette. So that was the Pat McGrath one. The next palette I want to talk about is from Paul & Joe. Now, Paul & Joe is a Japanese makeup brand, and I've enjoyed a lot of their products over the years, especially when I was living in Singapore. It was one of my favorite brands to use. And this particular eyeshadow palette was part of some limited edition collection that they had, I think, in 2019. I'm not very sure. This palette basically comes with 4 eyeshadows and 1 blush. Now the blush in this is a bit too shimmery. I find that the glitter flecks are very obvious on my cheeks, so I'm not too happy with that. The eyeshadows are okay. They are just, I don't know, they're very average to me. After using it after a couple of years, actually, I don't really enjoy the formula so much. The first time when I actually used it, I really did like the palette. It was a very nice, easy to use palette. And the shadows here are also pretty heavily perfumed. And I'm not sure if it's because of that. The last time I used this palette, I felt like my eyes were a little irritated. So I'm wondering if it is like, you know, my eyes have suddenly developed some sensitivity to the fragrance or something. I don't know. So anyway, so this palette is not staying in my use collection, in my, what do you say, makeup use drawer. It's probably going to go to my keepsake drawer because I love the packaging. I love the aesthetics of this whole palette in general. So I'm just going to keep it aside for that. So yeah, so that palette is not being thrown, but it's going to be removed from my regular use of palettes. Now this is a Bare Minerals eyeshadow palette come cheek product thing, which was, I think, released in 2018. I remember that pretty clearly. I really love this formula of these eyeshadows. I think Bare Minerals has changed their eyeshadow formula. It's no longer this particular formula. Now this one, I really like the blush, and I think the blush is still usable. So I'm just going to keep this palette for that purpose alone. I'm not going to use the eyeshadows, although I love the shade because I think it's a bit too old now to use. Because in the back, I remember looking at it recently. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it says 6 months for the eyeshadows and it says 12 months for the cheek product. I think the cheek product is still usable, so I'll use the cheek product. The eyeshadow, I'm a little bit nervous about it because it says 6 months and yeah, I bought it in 2018, so I'm not going to use it on my eyes. I'll probably just use the blush. But yeah, that formula is really nice, and those shades were very nice too. I really enjoyed those 2 eyeshadows in that particular tiny palette. Now next, I have 2 Sleek Makeup eyeshadow palettes. Now Sleek Makeup is not very easily available anymore. I think they're no longer carried at Ulta. And these are some of their older style palettes. The first palette that I have is called Vintage Romance. And this was, I think, is this one. Yeah, this was one of my favorite palettes. Oh, actually, I think it's the other one. No, it's this one. Yeah, I used to really like these. These shades were just my jam. I like rosy tone neutrals in general. So, you know, this had a nice mix of just your regular neutrals as well as your rosy tones. This palette is quite old. Again, I think easily 5 years old probably at this point. Is it 5 or actually 3 years old? This palette is 3 years old. But yeah, I think I had enough fun with this palette. The formula is just okay. I mean, it's one of those drugstore style formulas, so nothing too extraordinary. I remember like I basically bought these more for the color story than the formula. This is the other palette. What is this one called? This is called Goodnight Sweetheart. And yeah, I think Sleek Makeup has also changed up their packaging, and I think the brand as such has gone through some changes. So I don't know if these palettes are still available. This was also another palette that I really enjoyed. As you can see, I've used them quite a bit. They do look quite ratty-tatty. But yeah, again, it's time to say goodbye to this palette as well. The shades in this were very nice, actually. I remember enjoying this palette quite a bit. This was that blue-brown kind of shade, which was, I think, popular at one point. There's a MAC shade as well, which is like this. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, these were very nice palettes. I enjoyed them, but again, it's time to go. These are also probably going to go to the trash because it's quite old. Now, the next set of palettes are actually relatively new. The first one I have here is from Essence. This is the Dancing Green eyeshadow palette. I did just pick this up some couple of months ago. These are amazing. I love the formula. It's just like $4 or something, and the formula is really nice for that price. The shades in here are super nice. I enjoy this palette a lot, so this is not going anywhere. So this stays. The next one is a Viziotris palette. Now this is actually a pretty slightly old palette, maybe 3 years old. This is the Viziotris palette. It was one of their limited edition palettes, so I don't think it's available anymore. But I absolutely love the formula. And I love the color story. This is basically my style of colors. So when I'm not doing like super neutral looks, this is the kind of color story that I go towards. In fact, I do find this quite similar in shades with the Tickled Peach. Not exactly the same, but yeah, it has a similar vibe. Like you have the same purples. You do have, you know, this one is a matte, and then you have this one, the matte there. Okay, this shade here looks very similar to this shade. This one here is kind of like this one. So yeah, there are a few similarities between these two palettes now that I look at it. Not exact dupes, but kind of similar. So this is the Viziotris palette. This again is not going anywhere. I recently used it. It's still good. And the formula is amazing. So this one is going to stay in my collection. The next one is from Tarte, and this is the Tarte Juicy palette. This particular palette is become one of my favorites. I really loved it. I just picked it up, I think, a couple of months ago. And again, the rosy tone neutrals, totally my style of eyeshadows these days. So yeah, and this actually has a beautiful vanilla smell. I really like the scent of this palette as well. So yeah, I'm actually tempted to use this next month. Let me see, maybe I will pull it out for next month. It's actually a perfect palette for spring, in my opinion. So yeah, this one is not going. It's pretty new and I really enjoy it. So that palette stays. The next one is from Jouer Beauty. This was their Drinks on Me eyeshadow palette, which they released for the December 2021, basically the last Christmas holiday palette. The Jouer is basically a drugstore brand. They're found at CVS, and this is what this palette looks like. I do have a full review of this palette too on my channel. And this one, again, the shades here are very nice. They're very nice color story. A lot of the eyeshadows here do perform more like toppers versus like full-on pigmented metallic foiled style of shadows. There are a couple of them which do have quite a bit more pigment. And there are a couple of them, like these ones are not super pigmented. These two are like topper shades, whereas this one has quite a bit of pigment, and this one is also pretty good pigmentation wise, and so is Whiskey is not that pigmented, but it's not really a topper shade. It's like in between. And the mattes are very nice in this palette as well. So overall, this is a nice palette. I might just pull it out again to use it sometime. And yeah. So it's staying in my collection. I think this palette is still available on their website if you are interested. Now the next palette is this one from BH Cosmetics. This is the Smitten in Switzerland, and this is the old style packaging. This is what the palette looks like. Yeah, I haven't really used, I used this palette just once, and I used the shade Zurich all over my lid, I believe, and I think I used a couple of these matte shades up here. I wasn't very impressed with the matte shades in this palette. The shimmer, the Zurich one, was pretty good, but yeah, if I remember correctly, it did kind of irritate my eyes, which is basically why I didn't go back to this palette. So yeah, I'm not sure if I want to try using this palette again. I need to make that decision. If I'm not going to use this palette again, I'm probably going to donate it because it's pretty much brand new. I've basically just touched this one and these two shades, I think. So yeah, this one is probably going to go to the donate pile. So yeah, that was Smitten in Switzerland. And this was actually the first time that I tried BH Cosmetics too. So yeah, it was not, yeah, I was kind of, yeah, I don't know. Everybody keeps talking about BH Cosmetics, so, which is basically why I picked this up. And yeah, the mattes were not impressive. So I don't know, maybe I got a dud. So now these are the Rimmel Soft no, Rimmel So Fierce eyeshadow palettes. I did pick this up last summer and I really like the formula. They are more of these sheer Japanese style eyeshadows. They are not super pigmented, but these are those bake styles, so you can use them both dry as well as wet. So if you want slightly more intense looks, you could use them wet and they are pretty good that way. But I mostly like to use my shadows dry. And these perform really well dry as well, so I'm going to keep holding on to these. Out of these two, I actually like this one better. These shadows were a little bit more muddy and not so pigmented. This one, the color intensity was as what you see in the pans, like even with just using a dry brush, it worked well. So yeah, I think I should be pulling this one out soon as well. It's been a while since I used it, and seeing it has now gotten me all excited about it again. Now, this is another new palette which I picked up, I think, January or December. And I did use this recently. And I also did a review of this. This is the Supreme Nudes, the Quickie by Artist Couture. And this is what the palette looks like on the inside. It's like a super cute mini travel size neutral palette. So if you like your neutrals, this is actually a pretty nice compact neutral palette. The only thing is the formula is just okay. I probably would not buy another Artist Couture palette. This was more like a test run for me to see how I like the shadows. I find them to be quite powdery. And for example, this particular shadow here, the shade Brilliance, is a bit too tightly packed. So it kind of is hard to pick up with a brush. So I don't like that. And yeah, the shades are pretty nice. And overall, I like the cohesiveness of the palette. So yeah, I'm still going to use this palette, although it's not like one of my top 10s. It's still a nice usable palette. So this one stays as well. The next one is from Jouer. This is the Jouer Ultra Foil Eyeshadow Palette. I believe this palette is also still available. I have seen this on Jouer's website. So if you like this, like what you see, I can show it. This is basically a full-on lid shade palette. There's like, there are like no mattes in this. So you really need to pull in another palette if you want to have some mattes. If you like to do just like a one swipe metallic look on your eyelids, this palette is perfect because these shadows are extremely foiled and they actually remind me of the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights eyeshadow palette, you know, the shades and the formula. It's like really creamy metallic mattes. Sorry, metallics, not metallic mattes. They're very creamy metallics. And this palette has been with me for now 2 years, probably 2 or 2.5 years. I will try to use this palette a bit more this year, and yeah, hopefully it hasn't expired. I don't think it has. It smells fine, so I'm guessing I can still use it. And then, you know, probably early next year, maybe by next year, I might have to declutter this because it might get too old by then to use. But it's a beautiful formula. I wish Jouer would come out with more of this style of, you know, formula and packaging and everything. I like the packaging too, although this is actually a sticker. I like the fact that it's a nice cute dragonfly on here. So yeah, like I was saying, this palette is still available on Jouer's website. I think it's there in their sale page or goodbye page or something. So if you like that palette, it's still available. This one is also one of my favorite drugstore palettes. This is the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights palette. This one also was a recent purchase, so I'm not going to declutter this anytime soon. This one, again, very nice formula, very creamy metallics, very foiled. And of course, I've been using this more with a brush, but of course, if you use your finger, it's going to be even more intense. So if you like intense metallics, this palette is perfect. It's also at, it's not too expensive. I think for the most part, you can always like use coupons or get it on sale. I think I picked this up for like 10-12 bucks. And I think for that price, it's really nice. So that's the Jungle Lights palette. That one is not going anywhere either. The last palette I have is from Jouer Beauty. I haven't actually opened this palette or used it yet. It's still in the packaging. This is also a palette I want to use maybe next month. This is what it is. It's basically a face and eye palette. This is called Chasing the Sun. I believe this was part of their summer collection last year. And I picked this palette up sometime in December, if I remember right. So yeah, this is what it looks like on the inside. As you can see, it's untouched. I haven't used this palette. So again, this is also not going anywhere. It has 2 bronzers and a highlighter, and then it has 5 different eyeshadows. Again, these eyeshadows are also looking extremely warm toned, but let's see how it goes. I wish they had like 1 blush instead of 2 bronzers. I don't know who uses 2 bronzers. I mean, at least not in the same face palette. I don't know. Anyway, so that was the Jouer Beauty one, which I haven't actually used yet. So that's it, actually. We've gone through most of my, I think we've gone through all my eyeshadow palettes right now. And let's see now how many am I actually going to be throwing away. So I'm going to be throwing away this. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one I'm not throwing away. That's going to go to my keepsake pile. Oh, how many did I count just now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 and 8. So I'm actually throwing away 8 eyeshadow palettes. And this is 1 palette which is basically going to be donated. And I have 1, 2, and 3 palettes which are going to be in my keepsake pile. So that's like 3 there, and now I have a maybe pile. The maybe pile actually has just this one. So I will try to use this sometime this year and then make up my mind on it and then just either throw it away or give it off to somebody. So this is the maybe pile. And of course we have all the palettes that I'm keeping. This actually I wouldn't count as an eyeshadow palette anymore because I plan to just use the blush. These, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I have 14 palettes, which I'm actually going to be keeping and using for the rest of the, 14 and 15 actually. This one, this is brand new. I haven't used this yet. So I have 15 palettes to use, and I'm getting rid of quite a few. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like declutters, I probably might do like a foundation declutter next. So till the next video, I will see you soon. Bye.